You're listening to Fresh Hope for Mental Health. Hello, my friend, and welcome to Fresh Hope for Mental Health. I'm Brad Hoefs, your host. Our purpose here on Fresh Hope for Mental Health is to empower you to live a faith-filled life, rich and full, in spite of having a mental health diagnosis. Today, it's just me, and I thought we'd talk peer-to-peer. I have a diagnosis of bipolar disorder and have had that since 1995. And the last 12 years, I've lived pretty much symptom-free. Doctor would call it remission, I suppose. And I just want to talk to you as somebody who has a diagnosis and is working through it, something I take care of every day. And so I hope that you'll find this helpful, because what I want to talk about today is something that I think a lot of us who have mental health disorders, mental health issues do. But I also think it's an emotional thing. It's a learned thing that we do many times that isn't just because of our mental health issue. So this really pertains to anybody and everybody, and that is ruminating. What is ruminating? Well, let's clarify. Ruminating is a word used for how cows eat, and I think yaks do it also, and that's where you chew something, you chew your food, and then it comes back up, and they chew it again, and then it goes back down, and they chew it again. I don't know how many times they technically do it, but that's where the word comes from. But emotional ruminating, or ruminating on the same thought over and over, and it gets stuck. Usually it's negative. I've never found myself very often ruminating on things that were positive. And what happens is that you have an electrical current in your brain, and those currents get stuck together, if you will, and like an old long play vinyl record, the needle will get stuck in that groove. And what happens is it digs it deeper and deeper and deeper, and it makes it harder and harder to get out of that. So it's that obsessive thinking about something over and over and over. One of my greatest challenges early on in my recovery was how to stop that. My initial episode that brought the diagnosis so many years ago was something that caused me deep regret, deep hurt to other people, to my family, but also there was a lot of hurt that happened back to me. And I would ruminate about those things day in, day out, and I just could not stop thinking about them. So I really did a lot of homework, and I broke that chain. There's a book out there. It's called Who Switched Off My Brain by Dr. Caroline Leaf. I would recommend that book. She says that it's possible to detox your brain within 30 days from that kind of stinking thinking, if you will, that cycle of ruminating that goes on and over inside your head. Now, there's a couple of things I don't agree with her on, and I've met her in person, had the opportunity to talk with her. And one is she believes that many mental health disorders can be cured by natural means, and who can afford it? You know, that's the issue. And she's not talking about just with food and vitamins. She's talking about knowing what the balance and makeup of the body is and those kinds of things. So with that said, though, everything else she talks about is so true. Paul in the New Testament says that we need to take control of our thinking. We need to be in charge of it, choose our thinking. And boy, is that true. Most of us let our minds be on automatic pilot, and when we do that, we ruminate over and over, and especially if something's bothering us or troubling us. I've even had it where I would start worrying about the fact that I couldn't remember what I needed to be ruminating about. What a horrible place to live. So here are 3 tools, just very hands-on kinds of things that I have found extremely helpful in overcoming my ruminating. First of all, choose with your will to control your thinking. Decide today that your brain is not going to be on its own, that you're going to determine what you think about, when you think about it, and how long you think about it. Now, like I just said, Paul talks about, he says, take captive your thinking. In other places, Paul in the New Testament says, think on these things, that which is right, which is pure, which is good, etc., etc. Because in a very real way, what you think about is how you're going to feel then. Our feelings are based upon what we think, and what we think is based upon what we believe. You may have to work backwards. You may have to say, okay, here's my emotion, here's what I'm thinking about. So what does that really mean that I believe about this? But in any case, choose when you're going to do that, how you're going to do it, and how long you're going to do it. Control your thinking. Instead of allowing your mind to simply be on automatic pilot, choose to control what you're thinking about. Even if you've been ruminating about a worry that is true, choose to simply stop letting it play over and over in your head and decide, okay, I'm going to worry about that, or I'm going to feel about it, or I'm going to think about it for this long today, and then I'm done. You will find you may have to do this every couple of seconds at first, but honestly, when I started being in charge and realized that I didn't have to just think about anything or just let my mind wander, it was very powerful. The second thing is, when ruminating, I learned that it's actually possible to tell myself out loud to stop ruminating. Now, I read somewhere that if your brain hears a voice or it hears a sound that disrupts the brain pattern, that it actually can interrupt that repetitive thinking. And it certainly worked for me. It's similar to someone interrupting you when you're really focused on something, and then it's difficult to get your focus back. I don't know if you've ever been reading a book or doing something very intensely, and somebody walks in the room and scares you half to death, and then getting back into what you were doing is nearly impossible. Well, that's the same way this principle works. So when I would find myself thinking the same thing over and over and over, I would literally say to myself out loud, stop, Brad. You're ruminating and it's not doing you any good. And it was my voice interrupting my brain, so to speak. Just thinking those thoughts didn't really do it for me. Just thinking, okay, stop, you're ruminating. I had to hear my voice out loud. And it worked. So first two principles. One, choose to control your thinking. What you're going to think about, when you're going to think about it, how long you're going to think about it, and even why you're thinking about it. Then secondly, when you begin to ruminate, and it will happen a lot at first, you have to say to yourself out loud, stop, or do something that will interrupt your brain. Now, once you tell yourself to stop, then you have to go and do something else. Get focused on something else. I found that when I was watching television, I would kind of vegetate in front of it, and my mind would wander all over the place. Well, if I'm not engaged in something, then my brain thinks it's on its own to cleverly decide what it wants to think about. So I very much stay focused, and here's what I'm doing, and here's why I'm doing it, and blah, blah, blah. And it helps. So you want to choose to control your thinking. You want to actually tell yourself to stop it out loud and then move on to something else. And then thirdly, I found that it was incredibly important for me to be very careful who I was hanging out with. Whoever you're hanging out with all the time is who you're going to become. If you're hanging around negative people, difficult people, that's going to reinforce or enforce your bad thinking. It's going to keep you in that negative, that ruminating mode. And we really do become who we hang around with. Now, if you've done any parenting at all, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because when you have teenagers, you worry about who they're hanging around with because, in fact, it's a problem because they're going to become like their friends. There you have it. That's just 3 hands-on ruminating ideas. You might talk to your doctor. There are sometimes medicines to help with this or side benefits to some of the antidepressants. I take one in particular that helps me not ruminate as much, but I really had to break the behavior. And so I'll go back to that book. Go on to Amazon.com today or wherever you get your books from and look up Who Switched Off My Brain by Dr. Caroline Leaf. Her last name is Leaf, like a leaf on a tree. So 3 things. choose with your will to control your thinking. When ruminating, if you find yourself ruminating, then very carefully decide that you're going to stop and say it out loud, and then hang out with people who have positive outlooks on life as much as possible. And because that's what you'll pick up from them. That's what will happen for you. Well, my friend, I want to thank you for listening today to this edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. I hope it's been helpful to you. I'd really, really like to hear from you. Email me your comments, your questions, your insights, or topics you'd like covered, and we'll answer them on the program. And so you can also leave a voicemail on our podcast website at www.freshhopeformentalhealth.com. And we'd like to connect with you on Facebook or Twitter. You'll find us on there, those things on our website also. We have a YouTube channel. We have all kinds of things. Go to our site, www.freshhope.us, and you can read a lot more about our ministry and what we do. And would you mind doing me a favor? If you are receiving our podcast through iTunes, would you mind writing an honest review of this program? We'd really appreciate that. Your review will help us with our rankings in iTunes. It helps other people find the program. So we have a book, we have groups, we have all kinds of things. But in the meantime, friend, please take care of yourself. And please tell your friends about the program. And until the next time, may the Lord fill you with His hope, fresh and new daily. Again, I'm Brad Hoefs, and this has been another edition of Fresh Hope for Mental Health. You've been listening to Fresh Hope for Mental Health. For more information, go to freshhopeformentalhealth.com.